No one had seen it before. That was the thing that moved through the room afterward. Not the silence, not the stillness, not even what she had said, but the fact that not one person in that room had ever seen his face do that. In 11 years. Not once. Han Woo-jin, whom his men called Ho-jung-nim, whom his rivals called the chairman, whom the city of Seoul called whatever was most useful to call a man of his specific and documented terribleness, stood at the window of the 34th floor with his back to the room and his hands at his sides, and he was not moving, and he was not speaking. His shoulders were doing the work that the rest of him had shut down. Soon had said one word, just one. His name, not the title, not the surname. The name his mother had called him, the soft, private syllable of it, the one that lived before the empire and the reputation and the 11 years of careful, deliberate self-construction. She had said it the way his mother said it. Exactly that way. Not because she had been taught to, not because she was performing something, but because she had been sitting across from him for 40 minutes, reading him with the unhurried attention of someone who had decided he was worth reading all the way through. And somewhere in those 40 minutes, she had understood something about him that no one in this building had understood. And the word had come out of her mouth the way true things come. Before the thinking, before the editing, from the place that knows before the mind catches up. Woo-jin, she had said. Just that. And the chairman of the Han organization, the man who had restructured 3 rival factions in 18 months and had not raised his voice once while doing it, had gone very still. And then stiller, and then something had broken in him so quietly that the room almost missed it. Almost, soon had not missed it. She was still sitting exactly where she had been, in the chair across from his desk, her hands in her lap, her face composed. She was not performing composure. She was simply composed. It was, he would think later, the most frightening thing about her. Not the word. The stillness that came after it. The absolute certainty that she had said the right thing and was waiting, without anxiety, for him to find his way back from it. One of his men, Chul-ho, head of security, 15 years with the organization, a man who had seen things no civilian vocabulary had words for, had quietly moved to the door and stepped outside and closed it behind him. Because some things were not for witnesses. World Build the Han Tower in Gangnam was not a building. It was a statement, 36 floors of glass, and intention that the Seoul skyline had incorporated the way a body incorporates a scar. Completely, permanently, in a way that made it impossible to imagine the skyline without it. The 34th floor was the private level, the one that did not appear on the building directory, that was accessible by a single elevator requiring biometric clearance and the specific knowledge of which button to press after the display went dark. It contained 4 rooms. The outer office, where Chul-ho maintained his station, and 3 additional staff rotated through 12-hour shifts. The meeting room, where conversations that could not happen anywhere else happened. The archive room, which no one entered without specific authorization, and which had not been entered in 6 months. And the chairman's office, the one with the floor-to-ceiling window and the view of a city that Han Woo-jin had been watching for 11 years from this specific elevation, watching it the way a man watches something he is responsible for and cannot fully love. He had turned 39 in March. He had not celebrated it. He did not celebrate things that happened to him by default of the calendar. He reserved acknowledgement for things that were earned. His birthday was not earned. It was simply the ongoing fact of him, persistent, continuing, indifferent to his preferences. He ran the Han organization with a philosophy that his predecessor, his uncle, who had handed him the seat at 28 when the position became available, in the manner that such positions occasionally become available, had called cold clarity. Do not decide with heat. Do not punish with emotion. Do not allow the personal to contaminate the structural. The organization is a system. Systems require maintenance, not feeling. He had been an excellent student of this philosophy. He had also spent 11 years discovering that the philosophy's primary limitation was that it could not distinguish between what the system needed and what the man running it was losing. He had not allowed himself to name that loss. Naming a thing required stopping to examine it. An examination of that kind was a luxury that the structure of his days did not accommodate. He was a man of extreme capability and extraordinary isolation, and he had arranged his life so that these two facts did not have to look at each other directly. Soon a Bara had arrived on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. She had not been summoned. She had been referred, which was a different thing, by a woman named Dr. Park, who ran the organizational wellness consultation practice that the Han organization retained for staff support purposes, and whose relationship with Wu Jin was professional, respectful, and had reached its natural limit 3 months ago when she had told him, plainly, that the service she provided was for staff, and what he needed was something the staff service could not provide, and she had a name. He had taken the name and done nothing with it for 3 months. He had called the number on a Monday at 11 p.m., which was the hour at which the thing he had been not naming had become loud enough that the not naming was costing him more than the examination would. She had answered on the second ring. She was 34. She was from Lagos originally, London for her graduate work, psychology and psychotherapy, with a specific specialization in high-performance individuals in high-consequence environments, and Seoul for the last 5 years, where she had built a private practice that served clients who could not use the ordinary channels. She worked by referral only. She had a waiting list. She had a reputation for being able to sit with people who had spent their entire professional lives ensuring that no one could sit with them. She had arrived on Tuesday at 2 p.m. With a leather portfolio she set on the corner of her chair, and a quality of attention that he had noticed in the first 4 minutes, and catalogued, and then spent the next 36 minutes trying to decide what to do about. He had said almost nothing in those 40 minutes. This was not unusual. He was a man who had mastered the strategic deployment of silence, but her silence had a different weight than the silences he was accustomed to deploying and receiving. It was not tactical, not a negotiation position, not an invitation to fill the space with something she could use. It was simply patient, the silence of someone who had all the time she needed and was not performing the having of it. And then she had said his name. The room was still holding what she had said when Chul Ho stepped back in, looked at his chairman's back, looked at the woman sitting in the chair, and made the only correct decision. He left again. CTA bridge my deep hearts and still water people, 60 seconds before we go further. If this story found you tonight and you felt the weight of that one word, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a like, drop your city in the comments. I want to see our family tonight. Lagos, Seoul, London, Accra, Houston, wherever you are. Every comment tells the algorithm this story deserves to be found, and this one deserves to be found. A woman said one word. One word. And 11 years of carefully constructed distance came apart. Let's understand how. The heroine's wound she had known. From the moment she stepped out of the elevator into the outer office, what kind of man she was going to be sitting across from. Not the specific man. She never presumed to know the specific man before she had been in the room with him long enough to earn that knowledge. But the category, the architecture, The particular shape of a person who has built something extraordinary and paid for it in the currency that doesn't appear on any balance sheet. She knew this architecture because she had been trained to know it, and because she had spent 5 years in Seoul working with men and women who inhabited it, and because, if she was honest with herself, which she always tried to be, even when the honesty was inconvenient, she knew it from the inside, not because she ran an organization, but because she had spent 12 years of her life becoming very good at something and paying for it in the same currency, in smaller denominations that added up. She had grown up in Lagos as the eldest daughter of a father who believed, with the complete and uncomplicated faith of a man who has never doubted himself, that his eldest was exceptional. He had been correct. She had been exceptional at school, at university, at the graduate program in London, where she had arrived on a partial scholarship and a determination that the people she had grown up watching struggle would eventually have someone in their corner who knew the language of the rooms where decisions were made. She had become that person. She had built the practice carefully, over 5 years, one referred client at a time. And she was good at it in the way that people are good at things, when the good thing is also the necessary thing, when the skill and the calling have found each other and settled into alignment. The cost had been the other things. Not dramatically, not in the way of stories where a woman sacrifices love for ambition and arrives at 40 with the ambition and the absence. More quietly than that. The relationships that had not survived the hours, the friendships that had thinned when she moved to Seoul. The Sunday afternoons that were for client notes and professional reading rather than the kind of nothing that refills a person. The sense, which she kept at the edge of her attention rather than at the center, that she had been very diligent about building the professional life and somewhat less diligent about building the other one. She had named this to herself, which was the first step, and was in the process of deciding what to do about it, which was the step that required more patience than naming. What she had not expected, in the Tuesday 2 p.m. session with a man who said almost nothing for 40 minutes, was that the not expecting would matter. She had been reading him since she sat down. She always read. It was not surveillance, it was attention, the deep and specific kind that was her primary professional tool. The kind that didn't evaluate or categorize, but simply received. She had received him, the quality of his stillness, which was practiced and very nearly complete, and had one fault line she had found in the 11th minute and spent the next 29 tracking. The way his hands rested on the desk, controlled, correct, and slightly wrong. In the specific way of hands that had learned to be still, and had not quite convinced the nerves underneath. The thing he did when she asked something that reached the fault line, the minimal adjustment, the redirect, the silence that was a different texture from his other silences. And she had understood something in the 39th minute that she had not known going in. Not what had broken him. She did not yet know that, but she knew the shape of the place it had broken, and she knew what word lived there, and the word had come out before she had made a decision to say it. This was not technically best practice. She had said it anyway. The hero's wound. She did not ask him about the organization. This surprised him. Everyone wanted to know about the organization. It was the fact of him that the world had decided was the most interesting fact, and the questions, from journalists, from rivals, from the very occasional civilian who ended up in his orbit, always moved toward it eventually. The power, the structure, the empire, what it cost, what it had taken. She asked him instead, in the 23rd minute, what he had wanted to be when he was 9 years old. He looked at her. Let's not. He stopped. I know, she said. Take your time. He had wanted, at 9, to be an astronomer. This was a fact so buried, so thoroughly covered by the subsequent facts of his life, that he had not thought of it in, he calculated, at least 20 years. He had wanted to study the distance between things, the specific science of how far away something was, and what that distance meant, and whether, at sufficient distance, a thing could still exert force on something else. He did not say this. He said, "I don't remember." She received this without reacting to it. "What did you love?" she said. "Before you were responsible for things." "I was always responsible for things. Before you were responsible for the current things." He looked at the window. "Stars," he said, and immediately regretted it, because it was true and small, and exposed in the specific way that true small things are exposed in a room where someone is paying the quality of attention she was paying. She didn't make anything of it, she just received it, folded it somewhere careful. "What happened to that?" she said. "I grew up," he said. "That's not what happened," she said quietly. Not accusatory, observational, the way a doctor states a finding. He looked at her. "Something happened," she said, "before you became what you are. Something that decided you couldn't be the person who cared about stars anymore." She held his gaze with the steadiness he had been clocking since she sat down. "You don't have to tell me what it was today, but I want you to know I can see the place where it happened." He was very still. He had not been told by anyone in 11 years that there was a visible place. He had been very careful about the visible place. The thing that had happened, that she had correctly identified as the event rather than the natural progress of a boy becoming a man, was this. His mother had died when he was 19, not suddenly. Slowly, the way some things go. A year and a half of watching someone he had built his entire internal world around become gradually less of herself. And the year and a half of him becoming, in response, gradually, more of the self that could survive the loss. Closed down, armored, redirected from the things that could be taken toward the things that could be built and held and defended. His uncle had offered him the position when he was 28. He had accepted it, because he was already most of the way to being the person who could run it. He had done the remaining distance in the first year, and by the time he was 30 he was, for all practical purposes, exactly what he appeared to be, a man who ran a significant organization with cold clarity and had no visible fault lines, except the one she had found in the 11th minute. The one that lived, he knew, had always known, in the part of himself he did not examine, in his name. His name was what his mother had called him. Wu Jin, soft, particular, the specific 2 syllables that had meant, "You are mine, you are loved, you are safe to be the boy who wanted to study the distance between things." The name that lived before the title. The name that his uncle had retired when the position was transferred, in the formal way that such organizations retired things, not with ceremony, but with the gradual, systematic replacement of the personal with the structural, until the personal was so thoroughly overlaid that finding it required the kind of attention that almost no one paid. She had paid it. And she had said it. And the 11 years had come apart in the space of 2 syllables. Forced proximity. Rung one he did not ask her to leave. This was, Shun understood, significant. She had been in rooms where the session had reached something true, and the person had stood up and ended it. Not out of hostility, but out of the specific flinch response of someone who had not expected to be reached, and did not have a prepared protocol for what came after. She had learned to receive those endings without taking them personally, and to hold the space open for the next time. She had sat in the chair and she had waited and she had watched his back at the window. After a long time, she did not check the clock. Checking the clock communicated something she did not want to communicate. He turned around. His face was controlled again. Not entirely. The fault line was still visible to someone looking for it, but controlled enough that if you didn't know where to look, you would miss it. She knew where to look. "Same time Thursday," he said. It was not a question. It was not a request. It was the statement of a man who had made a decision and was not going to examine the making of it in her presence. "Thursday," she said. 2:00. 2:00, he said. She gathered her portfolio. She stood. She did not say anything about what had happened. And she did not thank him for the session. And she did not give him the look that people gave when they felt they had witnessed something important and wanted acknowledgement that they had. She simply walked to the door and stopped with her hand on the handle. "The stars," she said, with her back to him. "There's a good viewing point on Bugaksan. Clear nights this time of year." She opened the door and left. He stood at the window for a long time after. Then he said to Chul Ho, who had materialized at his shoulder with the soundlessness of 15 years of practice, "Thursday. 2:00. Clear my schedule." Chul Ho had worked for Hanwoo Jin for 15 years. In that time, the chairman had cleared his schedule for exactly 3 things: 2 security emergencies and a meeting with a delegation that required absolute privacy. He did not let his face show what he was thinking. "Yes, Ho Jung Nim," he said. "Rung 2 Thursday. Then the following Tuesday. Then Thursday again." The sessions were an hour. They always ran to 90 minutes. She did not note this, and neither did he, and Chul Ho updated the block in the calendar accordingly after the second week without being asked. She was building something, he understood, carefully, methodically, the way a person clears a room that has not been entered in a long time. You don't start by moving the largest things. You start by opening the windows, by letting in air, by allowing the space to be inhabited by something other than its own accumulated silence before you ask it to hold anything more. She asked him, on the second Thursday, what he ate for breakfast. He looked at her. "I don't eat breakfast." "What did you eat for breakfast?" she said, "when you were young, before you decided you didn't eat breakfast?" He thought about it against his will. "Donyang jjigae," he said. "My mother made it every morning." He paused. The apartment was small. The smell of it went everywhere. She wrote something in her portfolio. "Was that good?" she said. "The smell going everywhere." He was quiet. "Yes," he said. Finally, she wrote something else. He asked on the 3rd session, not because he had planned to ask, but because the question had been building in him since the first Tuesday and had reached a pressure he could no longer manage. "Why do you do this work?" She looked up from the portfolio. "I'm curious about people," she said. Simply, that's not sufficient. A pause. She considered him with a considering look he had catalogued and not yet fully decoded. "No," she said. "It's not." She set the portfolio on the chair arm. "I grew up watching people around me be very capable and very alone with that capability. My father. Several women I admired. People who had built things and had no one to bring the building home to." She looked at the window behind him. "I thought that if someone had been in the room with them, paying the kind of attention that saw past the capability to the person, it might have been different." She looked back at him. "So I learned to be in the room." He was quiet for a long time. "And are you," he said, "alone with your capability?" She looked at him. The steadiness did not waver. But something, small, precisely controlled, moved in it. "That's my question to examine," she said. "Not yours yet," he said. She looked at him. He had surprised her. He could see it. He catalogued it. Yet, she said. Rung 3. The competence reveal, the fourth week arrived with a situation. Not in the office. Outside it, in the structure of the organization, in the place where the two worlds of his life touched each other at an edge that was always slightly unstable. A man named CO had made a decision that had consequences that were now arriving in the form of 3 separate phone calls inside 40 minutes. And Wu Jin was standing in the outer office with Chul Ho, running contingency logistics, when Soon arrived at 2 p.m. Looked at the room, at the phones, the controlled urgency, the specific body language of men managing a situation, and set her portfolio on the chair by the elevator. "Tell me what you need," she said. He looked at her. "You have 3 parallel situations," she said. "I can see from the call patterns." She was not performing observation. She was simply reporting what she had already processed. "You can handle all 3, but not at full capacity on each one. What's the lowest priority of the 3? Something clarified in his thinking. Not because she had told him anything he didn't know, but because she had named the correct question, which was sometimes the intervention that the complexity of a situation made difficult to see. "The Incheon call," he said. "Then defer it 30 minutes and give Chul Ho the brief." She picked up her portfolio again. "I'll be in the meeting room." "When you're ready." She went to the meeting room. She sat down. She opened her portfolio and she wrote her session notes from last Tuesday, and she waited with the quality of patience he had identified in the first session and had been trying to decode ever since. The patience of someone who is not waiting on you, but simply present, and the distinction between those two things was the entire thing. He was in the meeting room at 2:47 p.m. "You knew which call to defer," he said. "I knew which one could survive 30 minutes, she said. "Incheon is logistical. The other 2 were relational. Relational situations don't improve with waiting. Logistical ones sometimes do." He sat down across from her. He looked at her for a moment. "Where did you learn that?" he said. 11 years of sitting across from people who run things," she said. "You learn the difference between the situations that need you immediately and the situations that need you eventually." He was quiet. "You do that," he said. "In here. Make the same distinction." "Yes, between what needs to be said now," he said, "and what needs to wait." "Yes," he looked at the portfolio. "And the name," he said, "on the first Tuesday." The first time he had mentioned it directly in 4 weeks. "Was that needed to be said when I said it," she said. "I knew it before I said it, and if I had stood up and left, you didn't. But if I had." She held his gaze. "Then it would have been the right thing to say at the wrong time for you," she said. "And I would have waited." "How long?" "As long as it took," she said. "That's the work." He looked at her. "What is it?" she said. Not the professional question. The other one. The one under it. He thought about the stars, about the distance between things, and whether, at sufficient distance, a thing could still exert force. About 11 years of cold clarity and the fault line she had found in the 11th minute that he had spent 20 years not examining. "I don't know how to need things," he said. "I was taught that needing things was," he looked for the word, "a structural weakness in the system." "You were taught that by someone who was wrong," she said. "Simply no judgment in it. A finding, stated." He looked at her. "The system needs you to be functional," she said. "You need to be something more than that. These are not the same requirement, and conflating them has cost you." She paused. "Selected a great deal." "Yes," he said. "What has it cost you?" He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the city below the window did the things cities do in the late afternoon. The light changed. The angle of it shifted. The shadows on the buildings moved. "The name," he said. "Finally. When you said it." He looked at the window. "I haven't been called that. Not by anyone not since my mother." He stopped. It sounded like her. Shun was very still. "Not because you were imitating her," he said. "Because you said it the same way. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like it was simply who I was." He paused. I had forgotten that it was who I was. She did not look away. She did not fill the silence. She held the space with the quality she had been holding it since the first Tuesday, and she let him be in it. "Wu Jin," she said. "The same. Exactly the same. Soft, particular, the specific weight of a name said by someone who understood what they were holding." He looked at her. His face did not break this time. But only because he had already broken it, already done the work of letting it break, in the 4 weeks between the first Tuesday and now. The second time, the name landed somewhere that had been prepared for it. "I know," he said. "That's who I am." "Yes," she said. "It is." The external threat, the Seo situation, resolved. Most situations did, in the long run, when the person running them understood the difference between the logistical and the relational. The threat that arrived in the 6th week was different. It came in the form of a conversation that Chul-ho reported to him on a Wednesday. A conversation that had occurred in a place it should not have occurred, between a person he trusted and a person he did not, in which Shun's name had been used. He was in Chul-ho's office when he was told. He was still when he was told. He did not speak for 40 seconds. "Who?" he said. Chul-ho told him. He received it. He processed it with a cold clarity that 11 years had made automatic. Then he said, very quietly, "She needs to know." Chul-ho looked at him. In 15 years, he had not heard the chairman make this kind of statement about a person outside the organization. The organization protected its own. The people outside it were, by definition, outside it. "She is not," Chul-ho began, "carefully, tell her," Wu Jin said. "This morning, I want her to have the full picture before she decides." "Decides what?" Chul-ho said. Wu Jin looked at him. "Whether to stay," he said. Chul-ho drove to Soon's office himself. He told her what had been reported, fully and without softening, because he had served Han Wu Jin for 15 years and understood that the instruction to give someone the full picture was not a request for discretion, but its opposite. She listened. She asked 2 questions, both of which Chul-ho answered. Then she was quiet for a moment. Then she called him. "I heard," she said. When he picked up, "Yes, you told Chul-ho to tell me." "Yes, before I could find out another way." "Yes," she was quiet on the line. He waited. He had learned in 6 weeks of sessions that her silences were not empty and not a negotiation and not an invitation to feel the space. They were simply her thinking. He had learned to wait in them the way he had learned, in the first session, to wait in the room. "This is your world," she said. "Finally, yes, and you're telling me because you should know what you're in proximity to," he said, "and make the choice with that knowledge." A pause, the same as I would want. Another silence. Longer. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. He absorbed this. "Soon, I heard the full picture," she said. "I made the choice with the full picture. Don't make it a smaller decision than it is by second-guessing it. A beat." "Thursday, 2 o'clock. "Thursday," he said. 2 o'clock. He sat with the phone in his hand for a long time after she hung up. Then he said to Chul-ho, who had appeared in the doorway, the Seo situation, the person who spoke to him, "Handle it." "Yes, Hoijong Nim. A pause. Quietly, Wu Jin said. I don't want her to hear anything about it. Chulho looked at him. The telling look. The look of a man who has served for 15 years and is performing the compression of many things into a single professional expression. Yes, Hoijong Nim, he said. The declaration, it happened on a Thursday that started like the other Thursdays and became something else in the 41st minute. She had asked him, the way she asked things, without leading, without pressure, with the quality of openness that had no trick in it, what he was afraid of. He had looked at her. That's not a question I answer. I know, she said. That's why I'm asking it. He had been quiet. And she had waited, in the Thursday afternoon light, with the portfolio closed on her knee, and the city doing its thing below the window. Disappearing, he said, at last. Quietly, like a thing that had been held for a very long time finally set down. Not the way it sounds. Not death. He looked at the window. I mean, disappearing into this. A gesture that contained the office, the floor, the building, the organization, disappearing into the title until the person who wanted to study the distance between things is so far away that no one could, that even if someone looked, he stopped. Even if someone looked, she said, they wouldn't find him. Yes, she was quiet. Wu Jin, she said. He looked at her. I'm looking, she said. I found him in the 11th minute of the first session. She held his gaze with the steadiness he had catalogued and finally understood was not a skill but a quality, something she simply was, underneath all the other things. I'm not going to stop looking. The room was very quiet. I don't know what to do with that, he said. I know, she said. You're learning. You're very certain. Yes, she said. I am. A pause. You came back on Thursday. You've come back every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 weeks. You clear the schedule. She tilted her head, the minimal degree. You already know what to do with it. You're just not finished being afraid of knowing. He looked at her for a long time. This is... He stopped. Professionally, this is complicated, she said. Yes, she did not look away. I know what the complication is. I've known what it was for 3 weeks. I've been sitting with it in the correct place. A pause. The question is whether you're willing to sit with it. What is the correct place? He said. Not the chest, she said. Her supervisor's words, her father's ceiling. The 12 years of doing this work and building this life and leaving the other thing insufficiently built. Not yet. In the work first, in the doing. She looked at him. But eventually, yes, the chest. He was still. Eventually, she said, is not a deadline. It's a direction. He looked at the window, at the city that he had been watching from this elevation for 11 years, watching it the way a man watches something he is responsible for and cannot fully love. Something shifted. There is a delegation next week, he said. Thursday, the Busan group. It will require the full structure, the formal presentation, the things that are not, he stopped. Not the Thursday version of this. I know, she said. I want you there, he said. Not as, he looked for the correct word with the care she had watched him bring to words when the words mattered. Not as my therapist. As the person who knows your name, she said. He looked at her. Yes, he said. I'll be there, she said. He stood. He came around from behind the desk, which he had not done before in 6 weeks of sessions. He had always maintained the desk as the geography between them, the professional distance made architectural. He stopped in front of her. He was close. Not too close. Close enough that the distance was a choice being made and unmade. He said, with the care of a man who has spent 11 years not saying things and is learning, deliberately, to say them. I have been very good at being alone in this. I was proud of it. I thought it was the correct way. A breath. I was wrong. She looked up at him. Wu Jin, she said, soft, the way his mother said it, the way she had said it on the first Tuesday, but different now. Not a discovery, not an unlocking, but a recognition. A word that meant, I see you, I have been seeing you, I am not going to stop. He exhaled. Not the way he had exhaled on the first Tuesday, which was a breaking. This was a different exhale, the kind that follows the putting down of something heavy, the specific release of a weight that has been carried so long the body forgot it was carrying it. Thank you, he said, for looking. You made it worth looking for, she said. The choice she handled the ethics board herself. She had known from the third session that she would need to, and she had been managing the knowing with the same care with which she managed the other things she needed to manage, holding it in the correct place, doing the necessary thinking, not allowing it to be anything other than what it was, a complicated situation that required careful navigation, not a reason to stop. She submitted the case for transfer to a colleague. She documented everything with the specificity and honesty that the process required. She answered every question from the board directly and without softening, because she had built her entire professional reputation on honesty, and she was not going to compromise it at the moment it mattered most. The board's finding after 2 weeks was that the situation had been handled with appropriate professional rigor, and that the transfer had been executed correctly, and that there were no grounds for further review. She told him on a Thursday. Not at 2 o'clock. At 7 p.m., at the restaurant on Bukhan he had mentioned in the third session, the one near the Hanok village where his mother had taken him, the one that still made the doenjang jjigae the way she had made it. He had mentioned it the way people mention things they are not ready to revisit, and she had filed it, and this was the correct moment to retrieve it. She was there when he arrived. He stopped at the table. He looked at the restaurant, the wooden beams, the low light, the smell of doenjang, and the specific warm and old quality of a place that had been doing the same thing for a long time. He sat down across from her. The ethics review, she said. It's closed. The transfer is formal. She held his gaze. I'm not your therapist anymore. He was quiet. I know what that means, she said. What it costs. Professionally. I want you to know I didn't make it lightly. I know, he said. I've seen you make decisions. I know what lightly looks like for you. She looked at him. And this isn't it, he said. No, she said. It isn't. He looked at the table. The menu she had not opened because she already knew what she was going to order, the doenjang jjigae, the same way his mother had made it, the smell that went everywhere in a small apartment. The thing you came back to when you were ready to come back to it. What happens now, he said. I think, she said. That's worth taking time to find out. Yes, he said. She reached across the table, not to take his hand, not yet, not the gesture that lived in the chest. That could wait for the eventually that was a direction, not a deadline. She picked up his menu and opened it and set it in front of him. Order, she said. Tell me what she made. He looked at the menu, at the words he had not read in 11 years, that still lived somewhere in him in the specific way that the things from before the loss lived, preserved intact, untouched, waiting in the place where the man who wanted to study the distance between things had been waiting too. Doenjang jjigae, he said, with zucchini. She put the zucchini in last. Tell me more, she said. So he did. Resolution: he took her to Bugaksan on a clear night in November. Not on a date. They had not named it yet. They were in the patient space of eventually, which had its own pace and did not benefit from rushing. But he had mentioned Bugaksan in the first week. She had mentioned the stars, and it had been 3 months since the first Tuesday, and the evening was clear, and he had sent a single message. Tonight. If you want. She had sent back. I want. They stood at the viewing point with the city below them, and the sky above, and the specific November cold that Seoul does. Clean, particular. The cold of a city that does not apologize for its weather. He named the constellations. Not for her. She knew them. She had looked them up the week after the first Tuesday, because she prepared for the things that mattered, but because they were there to be named, and he had not named them out loud since he was 9 years old, and the naming felt, in his mouth, like the reclaiming of something. She listened to him name them. The distance, she said, at some point, between the star and the light we see. You said once that's what interested you. It still does, he said. The fact that the light takes so long to arrive, that you could be looking at something that no longer exists. He was quiet. I used to find that sad. And now, she said. Now, he said, I think it means that things send their light out before they know who will receive it, before they know if anyone will. He looked at the sky. The light travels anyway. She looked at him. Wu Jin, she said. The name that was his, the one before the title, the one his mother had given him, the one that had been waiting in the place where the boy who loved stars had been waiting. He looked at her. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. The name was sufficient, which it always had been, the specific private syllables of it, said by someone who understood what they were holding, and had decided the holding was worth it. He reached over and found her hand. It was, she thought, exactly the right time for it. Emotional close, she had said one word. Just one, and 11 years of careful, deliberate, meticulously maintained distance had come apart in the space of 2 syllables. Not because the word was powerful, but because of who said it, and how, and what they had been paying attention to in order to know it was the right word at the right moment. He had been standing in that window with his back to the room for 11 years. Not in the literal room, in the room of himself. The one he had sealed at 19 when the person who knew his name best had left, and he had decided, without deciding, that the sealing was the safer option. That cold clarity was the better philosophy. That the system required maintenance, not feeling, and if the man running the system had feelings, the correct approach was to make them small and far away, like stars. She had found the fault line in the 11th minute. She had waited 29 minutes more. And then she had said his name. Not because she had been taught to, not because she was performing something, but because 4 weeks of that quality of attention, the kind that doesn't evaluate or categorize, but simply receives, had allowed her to understand something that required the understanding before it could be offered. She had not said it to help him. She had said it because it was the true thing, and she was a person who said true things when she had earned them. He had earned the right to his name being said that way. She had earned the right to say it. That was the deal that no one negotiated. The one that arrived fully formed when the right 2 people paid enough attention to each other. Power recognizing power. Wound finding its complement. The light, sent out long before it knew who would receive it, arriving at the exactly correct moment. He had wanted, at 9 years old, to study the distance between things. He had spent 30 years learning that the distance was not the interesting part. The arriving was. NCTA, my deep hearts and still water people, if you felt that name in your own chest tonight, you are exactly who this story was for. Drop your city in the comments. I need to see our family, Seoul, Lagos, London, Accra, Chicago, wherever the light finds you tonight. Leave a like so the algorithm knows this one deserved to travel. Subscribe and ring that bell, because what's coming next features a woman who walked into a negotiation room as the translator and left as the only person in the building who understood what had actually been agreed to. I'll see you there. The light travels anyway.